So I spend a great deal of my time on a university campus, and I wear many hats. I'm an administrator, I'm a researcher, I'm a teacher, and today I'm going to talk about being a teacher and how to introduce this topic of environment to students who are not necessarily environmental studies students, though we have those as well, but they're from business, politics, law, and different fields, computer science. So how do I make this topic of environment relevant to them? And I only have 15 to 45 hours with them within a 3-month period. And this is a big challenge for a teacher. And I want to do what I do in 15 to 45 hours in 15 minutes with you. Let's see if it works. Biodiversity is pretty much on the fringes of modern society, especially increasingly urban society. And so mainstreaming the topic of biodiversity is essential because we as humanity are intricately connected to the web of life for our own survival, for our own health, and also there are very important ethical implications about what is the good life, how should I live my life, and who should suffer in the process of me living my life. These are all questions that come up when you start thinking about biodiversity. A critical topic when I teach is how do I empower students and how do I create a sense of agency? And by agency, I mean a sense that you understand what's going on, you have control over the knowledge, and you have a sense that this is relevant to you. So the few 15 minutes I have with you, I'll try to do that, but the 15 hours I have with students, I also try to do that. There's no way you are going to become experts in this field, but what I hope with the sense of agency is that you create a mental map in which you can start adding information, taking information out, adjusting your worldview. So let's go. And I focus on 2 topics, by the way. Knowledge, what we need to know, and the values that we need to explore. And I don't have set directions for you to go on either. I'm just going to propose a worldview and a set of questions that we can explore individually and at times together. So let's start with the very basic. On our planet, we don't only have living things. We also have non-living things. In fact, we have much more non-living things than living things. And the non-living things are rocks, water, air, and these are chemicals, some kind of a combination of chemicals that are in various states on our planet: gas, liquid, solid. And then we have living organisms, which occurred later on than the non-living, and it's actually quite miraculous that life happened on this planet. And it started a long process, journey. If we have a 4.5 billion year history of our planet forming, about 500 million years later, life starts to show up, single-celled organisms. And then it continues and evolves into a very vast array of forms. And all of these forms are very interdependent on each other. And there's much more of the non-living than the living. Just a very quick statistics, I don't know if this will make sense to you, but 1.4 million gigatons of just the lithosphere, the upper layer of our planet, compared to the 550 gigatons of mass, the weight of all this stuff. Right? So the image, you get all these living organisms that we're talking about, it's a fraction of the entire mass of the system. So the image you get is that you have these very intricate lacework of life, living organisms connected to each other, kind of spread over this mass of solid, liquid, and gaseous stuff. And these living organisms are intimately connected with each other, and they're intimately connected with the non-living. We evolved in this system. And so how do we categorize the living? I'm going to start with a little bit nerdy, very big, two empires of living organisms, the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. The prokaryotes are living organisms that their cells don't have nucleus, so there's no membrane covering the nucleus, the center of the cell, whereas eukaryotes are organisms that have a membrane, a nucleus to the cell. These guys were first, by the way. And then these guys evolved, and we've been evolving since. Animals, plants, mushrooms, fungi, protists. I bet many of you haven't heard of this. Right? So this is it's a bucket of anything that doesn't fit into the other ones we throw in there. These are the kind of the amorphous amoeba. This is the exquisitely structured diatoms. Like these are the images you see. And even the giant kelp in the ocean is a protist. And then in the prokaryotes, we have bacteria, absolutely essential for life. In fact, because of bacteria, we can digest food and so on and so forth. And then we have archaea. Now, bacteria and archaea are like each other, but they're not. So they're just like their membrane chemical composition is a little different. I guess that's enough for us to know at this point. And then there are the viruses. We don't even know if they're living. There's a lot of argument. But they're definitely like the robots. They go in, they do their function, they use the organism, and they replicate, and they destroy, or they're good viruses too, they defend, and so on. So this is the empire, the kingdom, the domains of living, that 550 gigatons on the planet. So how is this distributed? Of all these different living forms, how is this distributed? If we look at, this is the entire 550 gigatons, each color patch represents one life form, big life form kingdom or domain that I mentioned earlier. This is the picture we have. Plants are king. 80% of the biomass is plants. Followed by bacteria, followed by fungi. Our fungi specialists would be happy. And then followed by archaea, protists, and then animals, which is for us humans is the most visible part of biodiversity along with plants. Right? And the animals mostly, of course, are predominantly like insects and things like that. Right? So this is the mass. This is one way we could look at how life is differentiated on the planet in terms of mass. What about different genetic makeup in terms of species? And if we look at the species composition, today there's an estimated 8 to 9 million species on the planet, right? Now, these numbers are estimates, and these are estimated they're estimates going up to millions, much more, and maybe even billions. But this is the number you'll read a lot. And if we look at the different types of life forms that I mentioned earlier, this seems to be the breakdown in 2011 when the report was published. Since then, lots of technology has developed, and we're rapidly kind of identifying new forms. And these are underestimates, usually. They're considered underestimates, very, very safe estimates. But notice, these are estimates. What we actually know exists is less than 20% of this. This is the number we know that exists. Well, we knew in 2011. Today, it's probably 1.2 million has gone up to 2 million. So We also have to recognize that we don't know enough about this very complex system that has taken billions of years to evolve. But we have a big problem. We are experiencing what many are calling the sixth mass extinction of biological forms on the planet, and is the first one being caused by humans. IUCN, which is one of the lead organizations in the world on conservation, has assessed 170,000 of the 1.2 million, and they've identified 47,000 species as being threatened with extinction. That's about 6% of the 1.2 million. So it is a pretty significant chunk. And if we look at the trends, there's a lot of estimates that are saying that pre-industrial level extinction of species was about 1 per million species per year. Beginning of 21st century, it's about 100 species per million per year. And during this century, we're expecting to go 1,000 species per million per year. So about 9,000. By the end of this century, most likely we'll have 9,000 species per year going extinct. And what are the main causes? Anthropogenic, human causes. We have habitat destruction and fragmentation. So when we take fields, natural forests, we turn them into agricultural land, we're destroying habitats. And by the way, food production is one of the main causes of habitat destruction globally. Our food choices, our dietary choices are very, very big impact, especially meat consumption. That's not only climate impact, but also biodiversity impact. And also during agriculture, we do monocropping and things like that, so it additionally stresses the system in terms of biodiversity surviving. And then we have invasive species. These are species that mostly humans bring to other places from one geographic area to another places. And when they move this species, they don't have natural predators in that location, and they start spreading very fast and at the expense of endemic or local species. Also use of chemicals, either from antibacterial injections to animals to pesticides. Bee population collapses in Europe and the US are due to pesticide use. Vulture population collapses in India, for instance, was documented back to use of veterinarian medicine. Overexploitation, overhunting, overfishing, overlogging, even though it's not illegal. When we do too much of it, the system disappears. The species disappear. And then poaching and illegal harvest. So these are protected animals that we know they're going extinct, but we hunt them anyway because there's economic value in there. So these are the main causes of why today we're experiencing the sixth mass extinction event in the planet's history. So what have we done to counter this? I'll just quickly go over 2-3 main things. First of all, a lot of scientists are busy cataloging, identifying species. IUCN has come up with a system from least concern of extinct, that means existing species, to extinct in the wild, and then extinct, gone forever, right, species. And the 47,000 that I mentioned of the species that are on the threatened list, there will be in the vulnerable, near-threatened, endangered, and critically endangered categories. We've also adopted several main international agreements. 2 quickly I'll mention. One is called CITES, which regulates or bans international trade of protected endangered animals. And the second one is Conference on Biological Diversity, which will have the COP event here next year, COP 17. Conference on Biological Diversity, or CBD, has 2 main things, contributions that every citizen should know about. One is that they require countries, member countries, which pretty much all countries are members to the convention, to come up with annual, every 5 years or 10 years to come up with their national Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, NBSAPs. These are available on websites. You can go download Armenia's NBSAP published in 2015. It's a very interesting document, very informative document, and I'll use some of the statistics here. And the next one is it developed further this whole network and system of nature's protected areas, where we leave those areas to outside of human, there are various categories, but outside of human influence as much as possible. When CBD in 1992 was passed, the expectation was about 17 to 20%. Now with the new global framework, countries are pushing, or the framework is pushing for 30% protected areas of seas and lands. Politically possible, who knows? Unlikely, but there's the ambition. The other important concept to keep in mind is the concept of biodiversity hotspots. These are areas in the world that are pretty diverse, extremely diverse in living forms, different species, but they're threatened by humans. And if you notice, Armenia falls in two biodiversity hotspots, the Irano-Anatolian hotspot and the Caucasus hotspot. We have enormous biodiversity in Armenia and the Caucasus region, but I don't think many of us recognize that we do. We have 27,000 species of plants, animals, and fungi in Armenia alone, the Republic of Armenia. And if you take the Caucasus ecoregion, it'll be much more. And 640 of them are endemic. That is, geographically, they're limited to this area. Naturally, they don't occur anywhere else. And butterflies, we have 215 species in Armenia alone identified. There may be more, but we identified about 215. About 470 in all of Europe. 370 species of birds, 900 in Europe. In this tiny country of Armenia, there's such a high concentration of biodiversity. 35 species of birds of prey, predatory birds, like owls, falcons, eagles. 30 in the entire United States. This is part of our wealth, right? Our national and regional wealth, right? So, why should we care about all of this? What values should we have when we think about this? And this is where when I have this do this shift from facts or knowledge to values, we're not going to go through the whole philosophy of values and how this fits. What we can do is maybe explore the emotive part of values. So there's a rational part to values, and there's an emotional part of values, normative part of values, kind of what we kind of feel about things. So what we're going to do now over the next 2-3 minutes, go over several images and reflect on it. What do you feel about it? How is it that as a society we tolerate it? What values does it inspire? And if this disturbs you, I'm sorry, you can close your eyes. A family, a very nice family, sitting near the river, having a meal or ordered a meal, waiting for the meal, and a bear is trapped on the other side of the river for entertainment, I suppose, right? How is it that we tolerate this in a society? And then compare this to this family of bear in their natural habitat, roaming, kind of with their grandeur, with their kind of living their lives the way they fully can live their lives. And by the way, most of the photos I'll show are from the Khostrov National Reserve, which is one of the exquisite wealth kind of jewels of Armenia, and it's one of the world's oldest protected areas. Of course, back then, initially, it was hunting grounds, but now most of the protected areas historically were hunting grounds. But now, since 1950s, Soviet Union, it was established as a national state reserve. This is where you don't touch, you let nature do whatever it does. What values do these inspire? What about this? Well, the same maybe bear family, Artyom from Vyotsor, experiences a lot of loss, economic loss. Does this change our values? How do we adjust to this? That, okay, it's beautiful to have wildlife living, but it's very close to where we live. What about this, the Bezoar goat, again, Khosrov protected reserve? Kind of this majestic kind of scanning of his territory. And then you can actually pay to kill them. And there's prices set to those. Does it make a difference if you know some of this money is coming into the state coffers as taxes? Does it make a difference if all of this money is going to one person's pocket? Does it make a difference that actually this money is helping protect those species? Not easy to answer. There's no easy answers here. What about the leopard, the Caucasian leopard in Khosrov, in camera traps? Better to see it here or better to see it in a zoo, in a cage? What about this? Right? They are probably living through some kind of a experience of heroism, conquering nature, overtaking this powerful force. Of course, that was illegal, and they probably faced criminal charges because these were endangered species, these vultures. And then they actually bonded over it, right? I don't necessarily demonize these individuals, but the system allows for this to happen, right? What do these inspire? What values do these inspire? And this is not a Monet, right? It's just a field, flower field in Charnitsavan, nearby. Late spring, kind of it's yellowing already. So the way I want to conclude is, what role do all of these have in our values, our ideologies, in our religious beliefs, in our national ideologies? And who should take care of them? Who should take care of all of this? And who does it belong to? For me, my starting point in thinking about this, that it belongs to me, and I belonged to it. Thank you.